I have a bunch of just awkward songs I sing to myself.
What are your sound checks?
My sound
Sound checks.
checks?
Like I always do Baba Booey for sound checks, and it always
Yeah.
gets a laugh.
Yeah, I don't even like consciously have a sound check song. I think I usually will just do like a couple little riffs, but sometimes I'll sing something to myself. And it's usually like something like that song Come a Chameleon or like just something stupid like,
Yeah,
you
it's
know.
always dumb, but that's like to me the point.
Yeah,
You get a little chuckle out of your sound guy, which is usually
yeah.
pretty hard for sound guys.
Cool. Yeah, you're on. We're technically streaming. We're
Oh.
trying to make sure no ads do pop up. So,
So we're good.
yeah.
All right,
Good.
let's get to it.
Yeah.
All right.
Hi guys, my name is. Should I be looking at the camera?
Do whatever you want.
My name is Chris. He's here sitting with Jonill. We're gonna talk about music and process and a whole bunch of stuff. So
Yeah. Yeah.
just get into it. So first question is, how many instruments do you play, and can you list those instruments?
So I feel like it's how many instruments do I play, or how many instruments do I play well, should I
No,
say?
play it all.
Play it all. Okay. So I mean, my main instrument is piano and voice. I would say those are like the main two. But I also, I came up playing percussion, so anything in the percussion family, a little bit of drums. Been touching guitars lately, but I can't say I play them.
You, will you play enough for writing purposes?
A little bit. I've written one song on guitar, so I think that counts.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that counts.
Like I know all my chords in the key of G, so
That's a big one on guitar.
yeah, yeah.
Are there any like outliers that you can just do enough to like produce sounds with,
Um, nothing too fancy to be honest. I mean, if you can play a little guitar, you can play a little bass.
Yep, that's
So there's that.
those sorts of things.
I really used to love playing vibraphone,
Really?
and honestly, I touched a vibraphone the other day, and I was like, I need to get one of these.
Brutal instrument to move.
It is.
Keep in tune.
It's honestly anybody I know who gigs with a vibraphone. It's like they have some type of crazy process to get it to the gig, or you have to always, yeah, exactly. But yeah, I know someone who bikes with a vibraphone, and that's the thing. I'm like, I don't know how you do it, but more power to you.
Must be a big dude.
No, 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 lady. Yeah.
Oh wow.
Mhm.
Wow,
Mhm.
that's tough. How many years of the primaries, which I would imagine are keys, vocals?
Percussion seems like to a certain extent, but of keys and vocals, how many years would you say on keys? Let's
Yeah.
start with that.
So I would say singing. I've been singing all my life, honestly. It'd be hard to even say how long. At least like I'm 26.
Yeah.
At least 20 years. Piano is more so recent. Recent in the sense of I've really only been playing seriously for like 10 years.
Wow.
Um, but I've been around piano so long.
Yeah.
Just because my dad plays piano, so I've had it in the house. I've messed around, but really didn't start taking it seriously until like end of high school. So
Wow, that's really cool.
yeah.
Is it having it around the house? Was it something that was encouraged to like you should be playing sort of thing, or is it just was it just there and just waiting?
It
sort
was
of
just
thing?
there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Funny enough, I feel like with that type of thing, you would think like, oh, people always say your parents showed you stuff, right?
Yeah.
My parents really did not show me much of anything.
Yeah, because
Everything.
that's usually pretty heavy-handed. If you have musician parents, it's like
Yeah,
they,
yeah, yeah.
they want you to do it.
Yeah, and that's no, that's nothing against them. It's just, it was in the house, and they both were self-taught, so they didn't
Yeah.
really have this sense of, oh, we should get you lessons. It was just like, we do music, you do music.
Which I would imagine is somewhat more of a healthy way to do it, right? Because in that sense, it's there, but it's not being shoved down your throat. It's not being formalized, and it's something that you eventually come into
Yeah,
on your own.
yeah, you really get to pick and choose what you actually like, which I think I really liked about that. I mean, my entrance into playing piano, I think, was not as traditional as a lot of people. I mean, a
Yeah.
lot of people I know, you either go the route of getting private lessons, you might have came up obviously playing classical, maybe jazz, maybe gospel. For me, I was like learning R&B and pop songs,
Yeah.
and then I kind of got more into the gospel and the jazz a little later. So
When you started learning those, was it as a means to supplement your voice, or was it like you fell in love with the instrument for the instrument? Not that, I mean, that's kind of parsing a little bit, but like I'd imagine it's mostly for the accompaniment aspect.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's exactly what it was. Honestly, that and songwriting. It
Yeah.
was like songwriting. I actually think was my first passion, even more than singing and playing. I just liked to write songs.
Yeah.
You know.
No, I definitely agree. I get you on that one.
Yeah,
Because there
yeah.
is something intangible about it, right? Like it's got a you can't really, out of anything that I've taught, songwriting is by far the hardest because it's like it's pretty much impossible. You're
Yeah.
pretty much faking it through it. You're like, these are things that work for other people. This has worked for me. This has also worked for me.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, it's one of those things. It's like there's not really any rules, and yet like there's vague rules that you would
Yeah.
be like, you should learn these potential rules so that you can break them once you actually get good, which is kind of everything. But like songwriting, like you said, it's you can't teach it. It's just like naturally you have to work that muscle until it gets to a place where you're like, okay, like I think I have a sense of how to do this thing, you know?
Same time, like you said, it's working a muscle, right? Like
Yeah.
so sometimes I think when I see people who get frustrated with songwriting, a lot of times it's like, well, how many songs do you write? It's like, well, I wrote one song this year. I'm like, that's why you're frustrated writing songs,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
a lot of them are going to be bad. Like it's
Yeah.
gonna, for me at least, whenever I write, it's about 5 or 6 that are really bad before I get one that I'm like, okay, I can do something with this.
And I think, I don't know if it was Stevie Wonder that said that, or it was either like Stevie Wonder or like Beethoven. One
Yeah.
of them said, I forget exactly whose quote that was, but it was something along the lines of that. Like you have to write so many duds until you get that one that you like. And honestly, that's, I don't know if you feel this way, but for me, I think a lot of that comes down to the pressure you feel. Like for me, if I'm not writing frequently, I start to feel really pressured every time I do write because you want it to be so good.
You sit down too. I
Yeah.
feel like whenever
Yeah.
I find myself forcing myself to sit down and I'm going to write now, it's terrible.
Yeah,
It's like, and
it's bad.
it does not go well. And I like look at it and it's usually like, well, what am I angry about? Or what am I this about? And it's like, it just feels forced. It feels like
Yeah.
you're writing into something, you know?
Yeah, no, exactly. I think what I've been doing lately, I've just been trying to create this practice of just writing, almost even independent of music. I mean, I write with lyrics, not everybody does, but
yeah.
I'll wake up, I have a journal, I'll write down whatever. And sometimes it's a song, sometimes it's how I'm feeling.
Is it
Uh,
usually prose or is it usually have rhyme schemes?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes like you'll write down and you'll just kind of have that in your mind. But I find it's like it's a free write, you know.
Yeah.
So it's almost good to even like get rid of all that anticipation of like I'm going to write a song and just create a practice of just making a thing daily, you know.
Also, I would imagine provides like raw materials. Sometimes I
Yeah.
do that with writing, where I'll write down lyrics, and then when I get in a spot where I find something chordal or something that I feel like works, I then just go through there and I'm like, all right, well, what fits? And then
Yeah.
to me, for it, just like when you see the words and you hear the music, it kind of just starts happening. Which I don't know if that's like for everybody. Not to say it ends up good every time, but
Yeah.
melody for me can spur pretty easily from just looking at syllables and
Mm.
seeing how much time I have to put those in there.
Would you say, are you because I feel like there's different camps. There's people who are melody driven, lyric driven, or chord driven.
For me, I tend to go chord. And actually, that was one of the questions I was going to ask you. So
Yeah.
I'll put that back to you in a second. But for me, I tend to go chords. I think it's primarily because I'm a guitar player first and
Sick.
foremost. And then keys and like singing is definitely the weakest point for me. So I'm not naturally just singing melodies all the time. And I don't have a range for that.
Mm.
So that's a very limited palette that I can really work with there. So a lot of times it's chords, but a lot of times it's mistakes, surprisingly enough,
Mm-hmm.
where I'm playing something and I mess something up
Yeah.
and I go like, oh, that's actually
That's
not bad.
some of the best songs. It was a
Yeah.
mistake, you know? Yeah, I think I'm a little bit of both, I would say. I'm definitely chords. Like any chordal instrument, that's
Well, because I noticed I was going through some of your songs and playing through some of them, and I noticed like a lot of major seven harmonies, but a lot of like shifting major seven harmonies that like broke like traditional
yeah,
harmonies and stuff like that. And I was like sitting there wondering like, is this something where you had the melody ahead of time and then the chords supplemented it and you can kind of reharm them and do them in your own way?
yeah,
Or did the chords kind of spur them? Because they do move. Like Ovaltine has like spots in there with like the B flat minor sevens and stuff like that where you're kind of just like, you don't expect it coming. And quarterly, when I'm looking at it, I'm kind of like this, like subbing out the E minor seven for an E flat minor seven is that's a pretty dramatic difference in a part, but it works with that. So, and it's similar melodically between those two parts.
yeah. That's funny you say that. I think like for me, it's interchangeable almost, the chords and melody. Like I'm definitely driven by both. I think because that's the essence of playing and singing.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like, and personally, I think melody is the most important in my opinion. I think like no matter how great the chords are, the melody is what tends to make the chords make sense, especially when you're doing a lot of things that break conventional harmony, you know, a lot of things that like aren't diatonic, like that song. So for me, like a lot of that, I mean, a lot of the harmony in that is very churchy, is what I always call it.
It's beautiful stuff. Like it really
you.
works well. And like it was funny because I sat there playing through it, and the first couple times I was like, oh, this is this part. And then I got to the like second half of it, and I'm like, that it's the same sort of idea, but the reharms like I kind of keep it fresh.
Yeah.
And the fact that you start with the intro is kind of like the pre-chorus in
Yeah.
a certain regard, like which I was like, okay, this is the intro. It's gonna follow traditional song structure. So those little tiny tweaks for me are always the things that make songs like so much more multifaceted, right? Because if you mess with the form in a sense that it doesn't pull the listener that far away from where the melody is, you don't sit there going like, oh, that intro was the pre-chorus now. Like you wouldn't think that when you're listening to it the first time, but it keeps it kind of fresh. You know?
Yeah. No, I feel that exact way. I mean, I think funny thing about that song, like that pre-chorus chord-wise is probably the most complicated part of the song. Like, and yet like melodically when I'm singing is very simple. And I think that's what
that part.
Yeah, because I mean, with the one there's like I wrote kind of one melody going that everyone plays, which is like just like a, not to get too into the weeds, but it's just like an F sharp minor triad, really, like the bum 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 bum, and then bum bum bum, and like that, it's really just pedaling this F sharp because like F sharp works over every chord.
Yeah.
So I kind of look at it like, okay, it's a pedal.
And you're contrasting with the chords behind it to give it a different sense.
Yeah. And I think that's the key to like writing stuff that's super complex but doesn't feel super complex, you know. And it's not even like I was like thinking of that when I wrote it. Sometimes.
Yeah, so that was also I was going to ask, in a song like Ovaltine, because I noticed on live takes of that, the intros, the chords kind of vary a little bit. Not that they vary harmonically. You're not playing different chords, but the voicings change.
Yeah.
And the vocal fills in the beginning also seem to change, right? Yeah. That's like a spot for improv,
just
right?
Riffing, you know?
Yeah, which is, it works. But then it kind of spurs that part of you that's like, okay, if that's the case, how much of what you do in a live context is improvised? Like, because the structure seems like it's fairly solid, right? That doesn't really seem to change too much.
The structures, the form of the song doesn't really change. I think I tend to have more of a jazz approach in terms of like whatever voicings, whatever passing chords even that you potentially want to put in the song. I'm pretty open to like whoever I'm playing with for their own like artistic expression and how they want to kind of interpret the song. And lately too, I've been trying to get away from that a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, I love just the openness of jazz and like how you never play a song the same every time you play it. Like, yet I do love the idea of being able to write parts.
Yeah, and compound and really be intentional about what you're doing. Yeah. And I would also, to me, some of the time, so I've heard that a lot with people where they talk about, I've heard some musicians talk about bands playing in a tour and they do the same songs like verbatim. the way they are on a record, and people will go like, well, I could have just stayed home instead of listening to that. And I get that idea, but at the same time, I do feel like there's still an art to that. There's still an art to being that specific as well with that sort of stuff. But you do, if you're going out to a concert, you do want to kind of see some wrinkles that you haven't seen at home. You know what I mean? That keep you feeling that sense of danger and that this is a living, breathing sort of thing.
Yeah. I think it's like, as an artist, you kind of want to find that balance in your performance of like staying true to the song, especially like with myself. A lot of the songs I have, even though currently I only really have like 3 songs released, right? But I have probably a set of at least like 10 to like 15 songs that I do, you know, when I play my own stuff. And it's just stuff that hasn't been released, but has been out for forever.
Yeah.
And the funny thing about that is you don't realize that it's not until you release the song that it like becomes a thing.
Yeah.
It's like the cement settles when you release a song, because then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I guess I have to play this like the record because people know what the record sounds like.
Some people say that once you release it, it's theirs. That's the idea. Like when you're working on it, it's yours, and then once it's released, now it's theirs. Like it's the audience's, and
that's the perfect way to put it.
The control in that, and I kind of get that, and it's a kind of, not that it paints you in a box, but like it does kind of, you do feel more pressure to stay truer to the song and stuff like that. Does like on Ovaltine, does the outro ever get extended? Because I know that like kind of goes a little bit more. Would you be, I guess, more likely to extend instrumental parts than parts with lyrical sections? Or is it just more feeling that out?
I mean a little bit of both, I guess, because I've done that outro multiple different ways, and I still do, because sometimes I'll play that song solo. When I play it solo,
I didn't think about that.
I actually completely cut the end and just ended how I first wrote that song, actually.
Yeah, so how did you first write it?
When I first wrote the song, it gets to the outro bridge section where we're kind of just like looping that progression. That's the pre-chorus. Mm-hmm. And then I just end on a regular chorus. It doesn't go into that big solo section with the different progression. That like kind of came up in the last like 2 years, and that song's probably like 5-6 years old.
As a way to like heighten the live experience, sort of thing, just ratchet it up another level.
Yeah, I just was like, it felt like it wanted to go somewhere. So it was a lot of like, like, how can I take this song that I've played 1,000 times and take it somewhere, but then like still keep it in the realm of this is what it is.
So in that same regard, you mentioned having like a lot of material that you've had for a while but haven't released. Is there any intentionality to that? Is it what we just talked about, where you feel like once it's there, it's there, and then that's the like last time you could touch it?
It's that. It's definitely that. I mean, it's a mixture of things for me. I think like a lot of it was being a perfectionist. And you want to release something when it's good, or when you feel like it's ready and it's great, right? And yet, like, as a musician, especially, I'm 26, so in the last 10 years, I've been growing so much that you outgrow what you're making, you know? And so at a certain point, you just have to put it out, because it's like, it's always going to potentially, or have potential to be better, because you're growing. So that's been my thing. Like lately I've been on a wave of just like, just drop it.
I think there's no way to tell really, but I feel like that's a healthier thing sometimes, and especially if you are consistently at it, right? Because even just like vocals alone, within a 6 month to a year time span, you're going to look back at those and go, why was I doing that? This is going to be better. And then if you're constantly touching up everything you've ever done, it becomes also like, for me, sometimes when I have stuff that's been around for a really long time, I don't identify with the writer. After a while, I'm just like, this, I get where I was at there. I don't really want to do this anymore. I have rules for my songwriting where I'm like, no talking about fall, no talking
Oh,
about
yeah.
cigarettes, no talking about like seasons.
Like
and
I
all
beat that dead. And
yeah, no really crazy metaphors that
Yep,
no
yep.
one understands. Like I have to have I have to
Yeah.
be able to, if somebody says that to me, what's this song about? I have to actually be able to say concisely what this song is
What
about.
is it
Not,
about?
it's
I hate
abstract.
that question so much. Though. That is one of my least favorite. And it's not because I can't say what it's about. It's just like, especially for me, the way I write, I'm not like a hone on this specific thing and write to that specific thing.
Yeah.
I personally like to write to like, I like to create a vibe with what I'm writing.
Yeah.
Like, not to get too deep,
No,
but
that's the whole point.
for me, I think of it more as, okay, what mood am I trying to emulate with this song, you know, and what imagery can I use to paint that thing? And sometimes there is like a core meaning, like Ovaltine. I wrote that song about just being somebody who's kind of leeching off of somebody else's energy.
Mm.
I mean, I find as songwriters, we tend to write about how people have done us wrong.
Yeah.
Rarely do we write about how we've done other people wrong.
That's a very interesting point. I never really thought about it in that aspect. But yeah, there doesn't really, that reflection. I feel like it's easier to be self-deprecating in a way that's not related to other people. Like I can
Yeah.
have songs about things I don't like about myself that are about me and my relationship with myself, but not about how I treat somebody else. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, for that, Ovaltine was like me writing a song about that and me feeling like, I mean, not necessarily like I was fully leeching off of somebody's energy, but more so just that I had no regard for the potential drain that I was causing another person.
Yep. See, that's still concise, and you're still able to talk about what
Yeah.
it's about. To
Yeah.
me, the reason I don't usually like, and I do have one, what's this? Not what's the song about question, but just a specific line in Summer Soft that I just want to clarify. But so that's gonna happen. So, but
Yeah. I hope I know it.
specifically, I think the reason I usually don't like that question, and especially when it's in a live context, when somebody gets up and they go, "This song's about yada yada yada," I feel like if it's like one sentence, okay, right? Like you're giving a general idea. But when it gets into a whole story about like this is specifically this and that's, you're kind of robbing the listener of like the experience of putting themselves in a song. Like there's
That's
been
true.
times where I've listened to a song somebody's done, and then they get on stage and they say this song's about this, and I'm like, really?
Right.
That's not how I saw that song at all. And now I can't listen to it
The
and
same
have
way.
that
Yeah.
feeling that I had with it. Like I do prefer a lot of times when people just are like that don't ever say what the song's about, so you can have your version of that. And if somebody comes up to you and go like, "Oh, I really related to yada yada," and you go, "That's not at all what I was talking about." I think that's how you can,
Yeah.
like kind of cooler, because
It
then
is, yeah,
it's
yeah.
more universal, it's more faceted. you
What
know?
I find funny is a lot of times people don't even really know what the lyrics are.
Yeah.
And sometimes they'll kind of fill in what they feel like they are based off of what they're hearing. And even more so, they're projecting their own selves onto the song. But I think that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I personally
Yeah.
think it's great, because then you're just like it just takes on a whole different life to it.
Yeah.
And again, it kind of goes back to the same thing we were talking about, where it becomes somebody else's, right? Now
Yeah.
you're like a part of somebody else's life in a weird way.
Communal thing.
Yeah,
you know, that
which is
we're all
like
a part of.
kind of for me, one of the pinnacles of a goal of a song, where it has. I feel like a lot of times for me, I just write from the perspective of I want this to be good, because that's like kind of where it needs to be. I can't really think about if another person wants it likes it or not. But when you do get that back, it's kind of like that added little bonus where you're like, and other people like it.
Mhm.
Wow,
Yeah, a little bit of icing on that
Would
cake.
you look
yeah.
at that? So the specific line was in Summersoft. There's a line about Grays, and I was wondering whether that was Gray's Ferry.
Yeah,
Okay, so
it
that
was.
is that.
It was.
Is that a narrative? Because there seems like there's a bit of narrative concept, at least to the second verse, where there's like, is it like it to me? And I know I'm breaking the rule that I just talked about in terms of talking about the song, but let me not be too specific. Is it a narrative-driven song? Like, is that something that happened to you, sort of thing, or is it the kind of? Because it seems like a night out sort of thing.
It is, yeah. It pretty much was. Yeah, that's exactly what it was. And I don't write super literally, as in like some people will write about this specific relationship that they were in and exactly what happened to them in that instance. For me, I tend to write about like an idea and then maybe draw in different experiences that I've had to kind of paint a picture about a thing.
It's also
'Cause-
brutal sometimes if you write specifically what's going on to the
yeah.
person involved who ends up, they're going to end up hearing it. And they're
Right.
like, really? Like, this is.
And that feels too personal for
Yeah.
me to be like, you did me wrong. I'm going to name this song about you. And
everybody knows.
everybody knows, yeah. But with that song, I mean, yeah, that was pretty much a specific experience where it was like, and I guess to give you the synopsis of what that song is
And if
about.
people don't want to be robbed, they can mute for a second.
Yeah. I mean, I wrote that song just about like I was biking with some friends down Gray's Ferry, headed home, and we were on some stuff. I won't say
Yeah.
what.
Yeah.
Nothing
No,
crazy,
yeah.
but I mean, and it was just like this euphoric experience, and I crashed my bike.
Oh my God. I didn't get
Right.
that aspect of it.
But it was like, in that instance, like crashing my bike, it was like a great moment. Funny
Just
enough,
hit in a
like
different sort of spot.
just because and it wasn't even like, it was just a great night culminating in that. I didn't hurt myself, but it was just like, and I guess I kind of had this idea of just like how, and I say this in the chorus about like, being young and having the space to be
Can't
reckless.
stop myself from falling now. That makes more sense.
Yeah. And I mean, it's a metaphor because it's like about being young and having the space to mess up, and how important that is. And also how, like, I say, like, who says the kids have no faith, living sorry, not safe. Like, I hate speaking my lyrics because it
You don't have
feels
to.
like
but
I'm writing poetry.
They're nice lyrics, just
Thank you.
to say,
But yeah, I mean, that just basically goes to say, like, I guess in your youth, that's the only thing you really can believe in is that you're like invincible, and that this world is like created and tailored for you almost in a
Yeah, but it's a rough experience when that gets a little shattered. so,
yeah. And that's really when you lose your childhood. That's
Yeah.
when you lose that innocence. And that's like, that was kind of the whole essence of like the summer themes in a lot of my music. It's
yeah,
just
I noticed
like
that.
summer is just like, for me, the essence of childhood. And
Yeah.
like throughout your life, summer is like, that's the thing, when you're a kid. When you get older, you're like, summer's hot, I still got to go to work.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
teach, so when I teach privately though, so like everybody goes away for the summer, and I can't go away for the summer because everybody's going away for the summer.
Yeah,
and it's
yeah.
like one of those things where it's just like it's really hot.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have the same sort of like recklessness, and like literally it's a portion of your life for a very long time that's just do whatever you want to do. Like find something to occupy yourself.
Yep.
And get to it. So I definitely get that aspect of it. I do also feel like that's like there's a Michelle Zauner quote about that idea of that. That's something to the effect of there are two types of people: those who have felt pain, and those who have yet to. And I feel like there's a moment usually in a lot of people's life where that gets like kind of flipped, and you kind of start realizing, yeah, I'm not invincible. There
Yeah.
are a lot of things that are outside of my control, and holding on to that sense of summer, I think, is important. In
Yeah,
a certain
yeah.
regard.
Yeah, and that's what it's all about.
Speaking of inspiration for songs, is there any specific spot that you usually find yourself more inspired than not? Like, is there an ideal setting for you to be creative? Is it a like quiet room? Is it loud? Is it voice memos that you find 5 years later, sort of thing?
Yeah. Honestly, I think I create under a lot of different circumstances. I mean, this circumstance in which I create the most is definitely me at a piano in a quiet room by myself. But sometimes, stuff will hit you when you're driving. Stuff will hit you like when you're at the end of a rehearsal and you're just doodling and you're like,
yeah.
I like that. And then you put your voice memo on and then you
I've
know,
done that many a times here when I've just been like, just one second.
Right?
15 seconds.
Yeah. Stuff has hit me in the middle of a lesson. Like
Yeah.
you're teaching a kid, you're like, wait a minute. You know?
I've had that, and then I've had lessons where I found something interesting musically, and then there's been like 2 or 3 students after, and I'm like, come on, man, Like,
Yeah, right.
Somebody cancel. Somebody
Right?
cancel.
I just need 15 minutes just to sit down with this thing and figure out what it is.
Can you do day after stuff? So for me, for some reason, when I write, it's a lot easier to write that golden hour,
Yeah.
everything at once, and then edit afterwards. If I like get a verse and a chorus, or like a verse and like half a chorus, and then I come back the next day and I'm like, I'll get this. It
Yeah.
usually never works.
I
Or-
can.
Yeah.
It's different though.
Yeah.
It's. I mean, and the funny thing is, I have songs that I've started, say, in 2019 and have finished in like 2022. So it's like
Yeah, that's a
the time frame from which I've written it. It was like I had this whole verse and a chorus for like 3 years, and then finally sat down and wrote a second verse. But half the time when I have to do that second verse, I had to like, it's like pulling teeth.
yeah.
You know, it's like you're really sitting down and editing, and just like, I mean, that's just my process.
No, I feel you. I mean, to me, that I don't know, the feeling of finishing a song, and especially like one of the quicker ones, is
Mhm.
I think arguably more exciting to me than live performances. Like, there's just a adrenaline thing. Like, I just
Yeah,
feel like I walk
it's
around
euphoric.
for the rest of the day just going like, I got this little thing, and no one knows I got this little thing, and no one
Yeah.
probably will, but
Yeah. Yeah.
but it's just a great feeling. you
No,
know?
I feel that. I feel that. And it's funny because, like, for me, whatever I'm working on at the time is, like, my favorite thing, you know? And sometimes it's easy to get caught up in that, too, because you're, like, just focusing on that thing that is new and you like it. And you forget about old stuff that is like, oh, wait, no, this is actually really good, too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always think it's tough too when you have new stuff to really know whether it's good or not. It usually takes me like 2 or 3 weeks because I
Yeah.
always think the shiny new toy is the best one,
Yeah.
and it's like then a couple weeks later I'm like, oh, I'm not coming back to it. Usually that's when I'm like forcing myself to try it again. That's when I'm like, okay, maybe this isn't
Yeah.
what I thought it would be, sort of thing. So when it comes down to arrangements and funneling out like songs and stuff like that, what becomes your Star Destroyers, which is like a collaborative effect,
Yeah.
group sort of thing? And I noticed AJ's seems to be in a lot of your like solo stuff as well.
Yeah.
Is there a rhyme or reason to what gets into Jonill stuff and what gets into Star Destroyer stuff, and or is it just a in the moment sort of thing?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's funny because Star Destroyers is so, like, new that we don't have much of our own stuff as much yet. But, yeah, I think, like, Star Destroyers is really just the homies. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like, it's really, we all play on each other's stuff already. We all make our own music. So we kind of came together and were like, we need to come up with a name for this thing.
So it's more of an amalgamation of like a creative community. Sort of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah. And I think, like, we're going to continue to create and make music for that project specifically. But I think everyone's own solo projects hold their own specific identity in terms of, like, their sound and what they are. And that bleeds into Star Destroyers. But for me, when it comes to, like, collaborating for my own stuff, it's, well, I guess specifically lyrics, melody, and kind of chords even. Like, I have the hardest time working with other people.
I get that.
You know,
I agree with you on that.
and it's recently I've been able to kind of do it because I put it in a different part of my brain. You know, it's like I like what I'm doing, but it might not be like my baby, and that's okay.
Yeah.
You know.
I feel like it's easier when you pre-separate those things. Like when you're like, this is my song. It is not going outside of my wheelhouse. And
There it
I'm
is.
staying in this.
Yeah.
Whereas if it's like, there's tunes for me where I'll just be like, this, I'm not going to do a great job at delivering this. And this is cool, but doesn't have anything to do with what I usually do. And that's a lot easier for me to go like, okay, I don't care. Here's the idea. Run with it. And that's a really nice, it's a freeing feeling because I'm like looking at it from a perspective of if this crashes and burns, I don't really care that much. Whereas if one of my songs, I'm like, this is terrible. I'm like, this is awful.
That's the worst feeling. And I've had that before where it's like you have a song, you love it, and you get this idea of, oh, I'm going to show this to so-and-so, and maybe they can do a thing with it. and you give them that song, and then they start doing something, and you get like songwriter's ick, where you're just like, wait, hold up, I don't, I don't know about that chord, maybe you know, and then you have that moment of like, I can't take this back,
No,
you know,
no, that's a no.
yeah, and that's like that's a hard thing, you know,
But at the same time, it's like then if you don't do that, you're stuck in this mode of everything ends up in your wheelhouse and you don't get. I feel like it's a really nice process when it works.
yeah,
When you do have something where you bring to somebody else and you go like, I did not think of it that way at all, and
they
that's
elevate it,
so
yeah.
cool. Yeah,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
or
yeah.
like just the feeling of not having the weight of pushing it and marketing it and getting it produced and getting it mixed and mastered and all that's when all that isn't on you and
Yeah.
somebody else is in the process. It is kind of nice to be like, okay, we're in this together. I can talk to
Yep.
somebody else about. That's kind of half the reason for the podcast too, is like that this is a spot where people can actually talk about that stuff. It's nice in a collaborative spot where you can talk about chord progressions or this is going a little bit long. And so if I talk to my wife and go like, is it a line too long? Like, it's like,
Yeah.
it's a good song. Don't worry about it. I'm like, yeah, but that one line, it could be like
Yeah.
a little, the pronoun that I use there is not perfect. And it's a
Mhm.
me or where
Yep.
the first person perspective stuff, like the nuances. When I sit down and I'm like starting to be like, should this be a we song or a me song?
Ooh.
That's big.
That's a
I
big
stopped
thing.
writing we songs because I feel like whenever I say like something that is like an all-encompassing thing, I feel like it's something I got to be able to really get behind.
Yeah.
Like if I say I feel this way, great. If I say we should do this, like it's like you really better be right about what you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think I already know the answers to this question, but do you study other people's songwriting?
100%.
And I could tell just by the
Yeah.
way you've already asked me questions
Yeah.
where I'm like, okay, well, all right,
It's
you're listening.
It's
but-
why. Yeah, I just love nerding out on it. And
Yeah.
It's to me, it's like. Also, if you don't take enough of a microscope to songs, I feel like you don't really end up learning what you like, right?
And that's what it is too. Even just learning what you like, but then also learning how to songwrite. Going back to what we were talking about, how you can't really teach it. But like if you know somebody's a good songwriter and you like look at your favorite song by them and see what like they're talking about, what they're doing, how they structure it, I think that's really what made me into the songwriter I am today, you know.
So for that context, what were some of the building blocks? Not to go like what were your influences, sort of thing.
Yeah.
But were there any? Let's be more specific. Were there any specific songs that you looked at and you were like, I would never thought to do that this way, that pushed it into a different sort of gear?
Yeah, definitely. Specific songs. So
or artists that have like
yeah.
specific techniques,
I mean, Stevie Wonder is obviously like one of my favorite.
harmonically insane.
Yeah, and he definitely has he's inspired me a lot just through harmonically writing something where it's
Yeah.
like you're writing something harmonically is actually very complex, but the melody is a love song and you can sing it like it's a love song.
You and
know?
I it's got that sort of quality to it. Everybody can sing that
Mhm.
one, but you look at the chords for that and it's
Like, hold up,
rough.
there's something going on here.
And if you don't
know?
play them correctly, it's a different song.
It's a whole
Yeah.
different song. So I mean, there's that. You know, I'm also like a really big John Mayer fan,
Yeah, John Mayer's awesome.
and I think he's, you know, one of the greatest songwriters of I don't know
Good
if he's-
simplicity as opposed to overcomplicated mix,
Mhm.
and that like a good towing the line between those two sort of things.
Yeah, I think like lyrically, I like the way he writes songs. I also like lyrically Frank Ocean. I'm
Yeah,
a big Frank Ocean fan, and I think he's somebody who I would say is more of a right to a mood as opposed to right to a experience.
Yeah. Well, you look
Um,
at Channel Orange had the whole, or not Channel Orange, the one before it with all the mixtapes. Sort of vibe.
You're talking about Nostalgia
Yeah,
Ultra?
yeah. It has like a whole aesthetic behind the entire album. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like there's obviously an intentionality behind the mood of that record.
Yeah.
And you know, Channel Orange has like a lot of like overtones of like different levels of society between like crackheads to super rich
Mhm.
people and all that sort of
Yeah.
stuff. There's a lot of like classism, whereas I feel like Blonde has a lot of the ambiguity we were talking about before, but creates a nicer picture. If you look at something like White Ferrari, you
Yeah.
can kind of say there's a narrative there, but like
can, yeah.
it's very, very loose.
It
you know
is
what I mean?
very loose because it's like sometimes I always call it like stream of consciousness is almost what it feels like, in which it's like he's almost like just saying things that are creating a mood, creating a picture, and yet like if you were to hone in on any specific phrase of what he's saying, you might even be like, I actually don't know what he means by that, you know?
Yeah.
But like overall, the context of it, it's like, okay, I feel what he's going for, you know?
Texture-wise, it also fits with that album a lot because you have these like more subtle tones, like where Channel Orange, there's pretty clear bass, clear driving sort of drum
Yeah.
grooves and that sort of stuff, and there's a lot more of that fuzzed out sort of quality to that record that works really, really, really well with that sort of stuff. So, and that sort of aspect, and this is kind of similar to the, are there any people that influence your songwriter? First CD you ever got? First CD or record you ever bought personally?
That I ever bought personally? Ooh, that's tough.
Do you remember what it was? FYE days? Oh, I guess it was
Yeah. I mean,
a little
and
bit
it's funny.
older.
Yeah. Because by the time like, and I would get albums, but it was like I'm really, for me, it was like growing up was really the start of like MP3s.
Yeah, I just realized I was dating myself a little
Yeah,
bit.
not
The
to
CDs.
do you like that. And I've owned CDs, but for me it was like most of the CDs or cassettes that I owned were given to me by somebody older.
Was there a first like this woke up like adult me listening wise, like so there, you know, when you're a kid you listen to kind of like this and that sort of
Yeah,
stuff that
yeah.
doesn't really like you won't listen to nowadays. Was there a first record that just like kind of turned it?
Yeah, I would say so. Songs in the Key of Life.
That makes sense. That's a hell of a
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, that was probably one of the main ones listening to. And it's funny, like the other one that I kind of want to say, my mom would always play this cassette in the car. And I always thought it was like somebody's album, but turns out it was just songs that she had ripped onto this cassette.
Also like mixtapes.
Yeah, it was a mixtape. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was a mixtape, and it was there was Herbie on there, a lot of Sarah Vaughan, so just like that ambiguous jazz like project that she put together, this mixtape. For whatever reason, I think held so much in my brain of just musically what I hear. Funny enough.
Well, it's because it's like a collage of all these songs that you probably
Yeah.
heard around the house like all the time. There's that culture of that. I have a student who started doing mixtapes and stuff like that, like
Yeah.
for somebody they were interested in, stuff like that. And when I heard that, I was like, it brought me back to because like when I'm 32, so like burning CDs and all that sort of
Mhm.
stuff was like a thing.
Yeah.
I remember there was one guy that I was in a band with once. I was listening to like a lot of Nina Simone, but it was like "Look of Love" and like these like ballady Nina Simone
Yeah.
songs, and like a couple Weather Report songs that were like pretty on the slow side. And I remember ripping it for him and be like, "You got to check this stuff out." And he came back to me. He was like, "Are you trying to tell me something with this?" There's a lot of ballads on here. And I was like, "I don't know. It's just it's nice.
It's
Nice
just good
chords.
music.
They're good.
It's
They're
just
good chords.
Just
you
good
know?
music. That's funny.
So even the stuff that you ended up burning onto a CD ended up having its like own sort of
Mhm.
life and its own
Yeah,
sort of
yeah.
thing to it.
And I mean, that's funny too when it comes to the generational divide, because we kind of live in an era now where people don't listen to albums like
Yeah.
they used to, especially because with the industry, people are really pushing singles. That's kind of where things are. People release albums, but it's not really what it was. You used to get an album, listen down to the whole album. And I feel like I was on the tail end of that. But then also like the new era where people can really pick and choose and tailor what they like and the songs that they specifically like.
Yeah, because you can do playlists and all that sort of stuff. It
Mhm.
does have like a different, I think, effect on people as and in general. Like
yeah,
you're talking
as
back
a
to
consumer for sure.
yeah, like because for like even in that question, first CD thing was big for me, right? Because like
Yeah.
if you only have like $15 and you go into the store, you don't have choices. Like I remember choosing like when I first got into Green Day, there's tons of Green Day records and I didn't know you don't know anything, 'cause the internet's not around. You pick one, you're stuck with that one.
Yeah,
And if
you
you
are.
don't like that, you will like it
Yeah.
eventually, because that's the only one you have. So
Yeah. And actually, now that I think about it, I did have I had a CD turntable growing up where you could DJ CDs.
Oh, CDJ? Yeah.
Yeah. Where my uncle gave it to me, and I did have actually a couple CDs that I used to listen to a lot. And funny enough, one of them I used to listen to 808s and Heartbreak a lot as a kid, which is funny looking back, because people always are like, "That's the worst Kanye album there is." But I used to listen to that religiously, and then there was one other too, but that and probably John Mayer.
Yeah. That was for me the first CD that I ever got into, and this will not be informative in any aspect, was John Williams' Star Wars soundtrack.
Hey,
My dad was like, "This is the
that's
first thing
it.
that you just loved," and I'm like, I don't know what that says about me at all as a person.
Some of my own work, you know.
So you have anything recently that you have coming up that you're excited for? Is there anything? Is there going to be a Star Destroyers EP? Is there going to be more music coming out?
A lot of stuff brewing. So I'm releasing a single. It's this Friday, but to give you the date, it's the 26th, April 26th, depending on when you're watching this.
Yeah,
might already be out. Called Breathe. So that's gonna be. I'm trying to actually release a thing every month.
Nice.
That's my goal.
That's a good goal.
That's been my goal for this year, and I've been holding up to it actually. So if either I'm releasing a single or a video or some type of project, so that's the next thing coming for me.
Live shows.
Actually, I have a show coming up too this week on the 25th.
Nice.
Which is Thursday.
Where's that at?
April 25th. It's at P's and Q's.
Nice.
So it's gonna be like a single release, and it's for
the tune.
Breathe.
Talks.
Yeah. So it'll be cool.
How does that process make you feel? So for some people, I feel like releasing music is like a happy thing. It's something where you show everybody, and it's like a cool thing. Or some people, it's like I don't just want to look the other way sort of thing, and just move on to the next.
Yeah.
It can be nerve-wracking, especially nowadays with the fact that you're public to everybody, you know.
I'm a little bit of both. I mean, I think it depends on the song too.
Yeah.
Like this song is one of the few songs that I've done where when it was finished, I was like, this is it. This is perfect.
Yeah, well,
as close to perfect as I think I can get it. And because of that, I actually feel pretty good about it, you know. Whereas like sometimes other songs, it's not that it's bad. You're just like, you have that anxiety of like, oh, is it ready yet?
Or if it is stylistically a reach, is it this, that sort of stuff,
Yeah, which this song does feel stylistically for me a little bit of a reach. I mean,
in a comfort spot
well,
sort of thing, like in a reach in a way that you would like.
Yeah. I think I straddle this weird line of I make alternative R&B is what I always call myself. But a lot of the stuff I make is heavily like jazz and heavily like just all neo soul inspired. So it's kind of, as a musician, I think musicians gravitate to that, whereas certain things I make, this song it's not poppy, but it's probably the closest thing to like poppy that I've made.
Nice.
But I love it. It feels like it's me, like, you know.
If you like it, you like it. I feel like in some circles, and this could be overstating, but like jazz, prog rock, we were talking about prog rock before we got on.
Yeah.
There is a bit of you do this, that's what you do. Like, we don't go over there, we don't play the easy stuff because it's just that you don't do that. But it's like it's still music. If it makes you feel good, like, and if you feel like it's accurately representing where you're at, making it overcomplicated for the fact that it needs to fit with any certain genre seems very antithetical to the point of making anything, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's very true. And funny enough too, I think as artists we tend to hyperfixate on what something is genre wise and how people are going to
hate
perceive
the idea of genres.
Yeah,
like
right?
when people ask you what type of music do you play, it's like that question where you're just like, I don't know, man.
But I think funny enough, like, you're own sound a lot of times is more so just dictated by the fact that it's coming from you, you know. Whereas like you might see like I'm making this jazz song and I'm making this song that's like completely different, but then just the outside listener, they hear your voice. They hear it coming from you with all your different isms that you personally have. And to them it's like, "Oh yeah, this sounds like a song that you would make," you know?
Yeah, but like being asked that question also feeds into that, right? Like the same sort of people who would be like, what do you listen to? That sticks with you, right? Like when you're trying to, it, honestly, also releasing music. When you release music, you put it on something, immediately they ask you what genres, and you're say, who is it similar to? Like, I don't, no one's similar to anybody. Like I get that like certain genres are obviously, they're easier to like help people suss out stuff. But like saying this person is similar to this person is like, yeah, they share the same DNA. Like, just like humans share the same DNA, but that's not the same person. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I like when artists just make up genres.
Yeah.
That's actually one of my favorite things, and that's kind of what I want to start doing.
And
like,
it's a nice snub to that idea.
it
a little
is,
bit,
yeah.
you know?
Like I was reading Hiatus Coyote's bio, and I think they like listed themselves as like wondercore or something, which I don't know if that's like a common genre or something, but
I would imagine not.
to me, I'm like, hey, I'm with it.
It works.
I'm with it. I like it.
All right, so final question. What is one thing that a non-musician might not know or understand about a musician? What is one thing that, like, you think an average person who doesn't play or doesn't know you on a very big level would go to a show and assume that might not necessarily be true? I know that's a specific question, but
that's a heavy one.
yeah,
It's a good
little
last
bit,
question.
little heavy, but
What they might assume about me and not know,
or just non-musicians assume about musicians. Like if you're not in it, you wouldn't necessarily understand.
yeah. I think that's funny. I mean, for me, I guess when it comes to being a musician, I don't know, it's such a broad thing, especially when it becomes to like, for me, I'm a full-time musician. What that means to me is I make 100% of my income from doing music and music related things.
Yeah.
And yet like music is literally my life in that way, but I'm no different from anybody who just does music on the side. So I think like, I don't know if that's something I can say that people don't really think about, but I think as musicians, sometimes we like maybe put ourselves in different spaces and different tiers and separations for where we see ourselves relative to everybody in this ecosystem of music.
Yeah.
And yet like to the average consumer, they don't have any of that. So it's like, and they also don't really have any concept of like who's really better or who's not that good, or you know. So I think like, I don't know if that really answers your question.
No, it does. Like
But-
so like to a certain extent, if I was on the other end of that question, one of the things for me, for example, I think that not many people necessarily understand is like that it's not always fun. I get that. I get.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that I love it. It's the only thing not the only thing I think about, but it's a pretty high up there. But I think a lot of times, like when students sometimes look at guitar players and they go like, well, they're just up there having fun and just like hanging out. It looks so easy. And I was like,
it's like that's a
yeah, but they've
specific
been in their
instance.
bedroom hitting their head against the wall for years and years and years and years before it was just fun and easy, and they're not looking at their hands and just stuff is flying. So I think like for me, there's an aspect of that, and not to paint it as a martyr sort of thing where you're like, oh, this is a really tough profession, because it's a beautiful profession and it's a nice way to live. But
There's a freedom that you like are afforded that not a lot of people have, which is good. you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess the point I was trying to make is like the average consumer doesn't really understand sometimes how much as a musician, I guess you tether your self-worth to music.
I agree with that.
And that's kind of the funny thing. I think being a musician is like,
It's not like being a plumber. I'm not knocking plumbers, but like
Yeah.
I plumbers don't go out telling everybody how good of a plumber they are, and that plumber's not that
Yeah.
I go out telling people that plumber's not a good plumber, but like it's not a as personal thing. Whereas for me, if something doesn't work musically, it's like a part of me that I'm like, and it's not necessarily on a public level if it doesn't work musically. It's just if I feel like I didn't deliver what I wanted with this song, or it got away from me, or it like really wasn't as good as it was, it doesn't have any true monetary value. No one's going to get hurt. No one's going to die. Nothing's going to change. But like to me, that can be way more upsetting than really, really bad things.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you so much for
Thanks
coming
for
by
having
and
me.
talking.
Yeah.
And
This was fun.
Appreciate it. All right.
Yeah.
We hit the button.
First
Am I
one in
still
the
here?
books. First one in the books.
Thanks so much, though, for real.
Yeah.
I appreciate you coming by. And I appreciate you being candid. And I put you on the spot a little
Oh, hey,
here and there.
you
But
know, good
Really
thing I
do
like
love
to hear my